Welcome to Electric Evolution with Liz Allan. This podcast explores the transition to net zero and the systems driving real change in how we move, live and power our world. Every week I sit down with the people leading that change, those offering insight, innovation and impact in many ways people don't fully see until they hear their stories. If you're ready for real conversations that inspire action and drive change, please like this video, subscribe to the channel and join us on this journey, and let's cut through the noise and build a better future together. Hi everyone and welcome to another episode of Electric Evolution. Today I have Tom Riley, who is the founder and editor of the Fast Charge newsletter and is just such a lovely guy. So Tom, thank you ever so much for joining me today.
No, thank you very much, Liz, for having me on. Always love to chat.
And we were talking about the fact that we're both originally from Yorkshire, but he's got a posh accent and because he's from Harrogate, darling, aren't you?
Yeah, the Golden Triangle. I have seen maps of it before where people draw the north and south and it's going along the middle of England and they just there's a big line that shoots up and circles Harrogate and back down.
Very nice place though. But anyway, let's just talk about you because we met face to face, didn't we, for the first time last year at Everything Electric. But we'd been talking before for various reasons, which we'll maybe or maybe not go into too much detail. But I wanted to bring you on because you are going to be one of the final episodes of this podcast. And I just thought it was really important to bring you into this and actually to help people understand know who you are if they've never come across your newsletter. Mm-hmm. So do me a favour, and I always start with this, go back to why you started in comms, when it was, and was it when you were at home in Yorkshire, darling? My interest in communications and politics and policy, which I guess is what the newsletter tends to focus on, or as one reader once put it, it's private eye for electricians. But my dad is very interested in politics, and we were watching things like Yes Minister and the thick of it, and being having lots of copies of the Private Eye left around the house while growing up. And at school I had the opportunity to represent the school at York Council for helping the council, which felt like Parliament when you're at school. It feels like York Council, that's everything on youth policy, which is basically like bus passes and stuff. So that's really where my interest came from. I did some really interesting work experience. One of the former pupils of the school was a presenter of Look North, Harry Gratian. Oh, I remember him.
Yeah, I know, now passed away, sadly. But when I was about 14, I think, or 15, I wrote to him and I said I'd love to do some work experience if that was ever available. And he said, wait until you're, study a bit more, and then maybe when you're 16 and 17, get back in touch. And I did, and I remember doing I think it was like a day there at Look North, and I was just kind of hooked onto media, and then I also did a bit of work with the Confederation of British Industry in Yorkshire. So I really enjoyed going and speaking to businesses with the local director there about what challenges and problems they were facing and how the CBI could help in Westminster. And I think after that, I just thought, I don't want to do university at all. I can already do this, I feel. I was very lucky in that I got onto the civil service at the time. You could only get really into it if you were a graduate. There was a fast stream scheme, but the coalition at the time, all those years ago, set up a fast track apprenticeship which would lead into the fast stream, and I somehow managed to get onto that. that scheme. It was a 2-year scheme. I started in Leeds for a year, and then one day I was desperate to get to London because I just thought that's where everything happens, in Westminster and Whitehall. And I got a call about a year in saying, from another apprentice I knew, he was like, I've got a job down in, the permanent secretary's office, but the private office I'm leaving needs someone. Are you up for it? I was like, yes. And I paid off the rent, went into debt, and had 8 suitcases and went down to London. Walking out of King's Cross, I was like Alan Partridge, staying in the travel lodge nearby for about 3 or 4 weeks until I found a place to live. And then, I got into, after that, I entered, I suppose, comms in HMRC. I know tax is not sexy, and it isn't sexy at all, but everyone talks about it. Everyone has an opinion on it. So actually, from a comms point of view, it's one of the most interesting places to be. And I was very fortunate in some of the initiatives I got to be involved in, like, making tax digital. That was first launching when I started, and it's only really happening this week. It's really going to be rolling out to everyone, which is really mad to think of. And then in the press office, it just absolutely, cutting teeth on working with journalists, which I really, really enjoyed. And because everyone starts from the point of view as, I hate HMRC, I hate paying tax. You can only go up. So when you had campaigns, like some of the ones that I did was around helping people, either students or older people, avoid tax scams. And you'd get a bit of, you get on BBC, get your director on BBC Breakfast, and it was just chef's kiss. It was awesome. But tax is always a front page story, and some of the things you deal with was great. And then from there I ended up working quite closely with our minister in the Treasury, who was also a transport minister, Jessie Norman.
Okay.
And then Brexit happened, and no one really wanted to get involved in it, but I sort of threw my hands up. So ended up being very involved in some of the Brexit comms, preparing for a no deal. That was really fun. Enter rooms in Whitehall and they'd just be full of cameras showing, videos of every port in the UK. But then we had the pandemic. I was planning to so by that point, I think I'd done about 6 or 7 years in the civil service and in comms, and I wanted to take a break, but then the pandemic hit, and through that, I was involved in launching the job retention scheme, the self-employment support scheme.
Yeah.
It was quite fun. HMRC actually became quite a critical player in supporting people during the pandemic. Even, gin distilleries changing their setup so they could make hand sanitizer. That was all kind of rules, in the department. So it was a really good time, but I certainly got to the point where I was a bit burnt out, and I had, with my brother, when people started being able to socialise a bit, came up with an idea for an app that would help people find public toilets, which sounds, it sounds weird to talk about it, but it was really popular, and we managed to get a bit of a sponsorship deal. So I left, and that's how I kind of thought, right, I've got the opportunity to kind of write now and have my own opinion, because I'd been there sheltered by the Civil Service Code since I left school. And I thought, well, I'm going to write about, food, and I'm going to write about cars, because, who doesn't like those two things? And I started the Fast Charge. I was writing for a website called Drive Tribe, which was set up by the ex-Top Gear trio. And it was basically a self-publishing platform. And I wrote something about EVs when the announcement came from Boris about, by 2030, petrol and diesel cars will be banned. And I wrote something about it, and I can remember it did really well on that on Drive Tribe, and it had loads of comments, and like 50% of people were, these are terrible, these are awful, and 50% were like, well, actually, electricity is quite cheap, and actually they can be exciting, and the acceleration is amazing. And I thought, well, as a writer, this is quite an interesting topic. If it's, ideally, I think, if you're writing about something, you kind of want maybe that split where 50% of people are going to go, oh, this is, I want to see what this person said about this, and then other people will be like, oh God, not this again. And that ended up, I've created the Fast Charge in 2021 January, so been doing it for way too long now.
Just say that.
It's I did it because I wanted to learn about the area, because clearly I thought it was going to be a growing area, and also there were at the time, I probably, especially coming from comms, naturally suspicious, and at the time in the EV sector there was lots and lots of positive pieces around, like Tesla was the only game in town, and so my mission statement with the newsletter began with, I will not lust after Musk, and I always thought I'd take a critical friend. Yeah, I always thought I'll take a critical friend view of what's going on, and that's kind of how I've written it since, and it's always been first person. I primarily cover I write for the industry. I've never really sought to write for a consumer or driver, though I know that some of them do read it. But I suppose I've always been more interested in, the sector and what's been going on, and writing things that, I don't always think other people have necessarily the time to do in trade journalism.
But you also write about sometimes quite tricky subjects, don't you? Those kind of interesting but potentially tricky ones. Which ones have stayed with you the most? Which ones have kind of made you think, "Ooh, crikey, that was an interesting one. That'll be an eye opener to people," or has it all been like that?
I think it comes in. I think the stories kind of come in waves. There are some where I had so I did take a hiatus from my newsletter for my health. I was very much out of the blue, diagnosed with a brain tumor. When I had started the newsletter, I ended up working in a private PR consultancy, a couple of private PR consultancies, and it was like a Friday morning or something when I was working there, and I collapsed out of the blue and got this diagnosis, which was really shocking. And but it kind of gave me. I suddenly had my license taken away after that, and I had all this treatment ahead of me. But it also gave me a very different perspective on driving. And I think one of the things I did to keep myself sane in that time was, thinking about what it's like to be disabled or be unable to drive, but need to be able to drive. And especially in some of the, I've known for a while that maybe the accessibility of public charge points can be really tricky area. And I spent a lot of time hunting around in various Facebook groups and talking to people who were, disabled and really, wheelchair bound, but having to try and navigate a public network because, they'd got an EV thinking it was all going to be fine. And actually it's a lot tricky. And the comparisons between, they turn up at a petrol station and there's always someone there to help them. Whereas when you turn up at a charge point, obviously it's kind of a DIY situation. And I wrote something around that and where accessibility, I can't remember the number, is it? It's like PAS
Yeah,
six
pounds
six
eight
one one eight
99.
eight
Yeah.
or but so that was actually interesting because I kind of thought it was bad, but I didn't really realize how important it was until
Mm,
talking to other people.
mm,
And
mm.
those are always where I find that the most, emotional and quite shocking stories can come from is from hearing people and hearing people's own views. And yeah, there have certainly with my health, I decided to leave consultancy and take it full time, give it a go, which has been interesting.
Yeah.
But certainly over the last year, I like to think that I've had more time to delve into areas that I probably even before wouldn't have really gone into, um, and yeah, and I think I've always tried to give maybe go after things that not that I think are wrong, but things that clearly others think are wrong, or I don't like. I've never ever liked you know bullies, and there is actually a lot of really bad behaviour amongst some of the figures in the EV sector, and sometimes there's equally way more great people and lovely people and who are all moving things in the same direction. But as ever with new areas, you always get the kind of like cowboys coming along, and um,
Yeah.
I think again, as I said, I've always been kind of maybe naturally quite suspicious of of people. Like we had this thing at HMRC was this line which was always, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Yeah.
And I actually think that kind of works very well when you're certainly like either looking at people or businesses. um, so yeah.
That's usually what I say to my son. You
Yeah.
know, if something's too good to be true, then just dig into it to make sure, because it probably isn't. Do you know what? There's a couple of things I wanted to kind of go back to. One of them is you've just highlighted the biggest thing to me from what I'm hearing from you is that yours is about injustice. Which is for me. I am the same. It's kind of that injustice. But when you said about the cowboys and people coming in, it's a bit like people just recognizing where they can make a quick buck. And that kind of thing. Would I be on the right lines with how you feel?
I think so. I think it's about, yeah, I think very much in terms of people being transparent. I believe, very big believer, I love an FOI. That's where a lot of the things that I do. I think people need to, I think especially having come from the position of having been, and probably still am to a certain extent, a lobbyist, and
Mm,
like at heart. And I know, I feel it's been very interesting. A lot of journalists end up going to comms, whereas I have almost done the kind of reverse in my career, where I went to comms and I ended up, you know, maybe lobbying for things that I really, really didn't believe in. I remember once, I always said I'd never work for an oil company. I ended up having to do some project for an oil company, and I really hated I hated myself. But you kind of, not that you know where the bodies are buried, but you kind of know how people think, what to look for. Um, One of the things that I think everyone should learn is how to, read company accounts. We've got all this information out there. But
yeah.
it probably makes me sound very. This all probably makes me sound very cynical, but I do like the newsletter to kind of, I think, focus on what's going really well and what's good, where they're like genuine people, like people are trying to innovate. I think that that's great, and I love hearing about new innovations that are kind of coming along. And I've always say to people, and like, if you come and talk, like drop into my inbox or tell me about something that they've seen or you've seen, because that's how the problems which exist in this sector particularly are solved. But yeah, there are, sadly, that as in probably every industry, there are always people that try and take advantage. And yeah, I suppose maybe I see the newsletter a bit as that kind of vigilante. um, but
Cool.
yeah,
But I mean, it's if you think about it, um, the the whole of the sector, this is about getting to net zero, isn't it? Or to decarbonize. And and yes, it's like anything, people do want to make money out of things. You're running a business. I've been running businesses and stuff, but it's how far people go in that, and whether it's the right thing. And I think you're quite you're really good. You give people an opportunity to kind of give their own feedback on your stories, but whether they choose to take you up on that ability to do that, and we know, what I'm talking about, because that's how I suppose really that's how me and you got talking in the first place. I'd been signed up to your newsletter for some time, but then something kind of came across my path that I needed to share with you, didn't I? Which we can't go into on here, but it is people taking advantage of the fact that we are trying to do something positive, and there's always going to be people who are just creaming money out, aren't there? Really?
yeah, and yeah, there is, and I think doing this, if I can call it a role, um, it I publish every week. I only have so much resource. I'm a one-man band. Doing it full time is a lot of, it's been a lot of sacrifice, as well as, it's been very good in some ways, given where my health was, to help recover. And obviously in terms of the things I do get a lot of tips. And I think often it's people who have, you know it's a loss of PR, and it's not very, it's not interesting. It's not for me. But yeah, so I know that when we spoke, and there's been lots of situations like that where I've suddenly had to kind of take, I think, quite some big risks with the publication, but for hopefully helping other people. And it's, in that particular story that I think we're kind of circling around, that was quite a big risk. I was really worried about it, but I wanted to do it because um, it was the right thing to do, and the people impacted by this business
It
needed
was
to
a
have
bit
their
like
voices
the tsunami, wasn't it? Where
Yeah, and
it just kept coming, really.
exactly. So, but yeah, that's it's probably the extent to
We
which.
can't, yeah, we can't go into detail, but there is something I want to go back to, that you kind of skirted around a bit, which I think is really bloody important to talk about. You had a brain tumor. That's why you collapsed, didn't you? Let's just talk about that, because your health is, they say your health is your wealth, don't
Mhm.
they? And then all of it, how long ago, when was the diagnosis? Because I remember I think I even messaged you. I think I messaged you and I went, oh my god, I hope you're okay, at the time. But how long ago is it since you got that diagnosis?
It is 2 years basically this week. So
Wow.
um, yeah, I have to think about. Yeah, I don't like kind of the like that.
No, no, I get you.
But no, it was very much out of the blue. I think, especially when it comes to the brain, most of the um, discoveries are actually by accident. I suppose some cancers, which is what a brain tumor is, it's cancer at the end of the day. And a lot in brains particularly, you just don't really, we don't really understand it. So how often are you having your head scanned? So a lot of people tend to find them when they go to an optician's appointment and they really notice their personality has changed, or they bang their head and they suddenly also discover something is in there. And in my case, what is strange is that the tumour I have or had, it's still kind of in there somewhere, hiding in a cave. It'd been there for years and years and years. It was been in there so long it would calcified. It could have even been there for like 10 years, which is.
So was it benign? Was it what they call benign, or was it still? Because I was listening to. I said she didn't before we started recording. I listened to a podcast with Davina McCall, and I didn't realise it was like 12 months old, and it was where she was being interviewed by flipping heck, Stephen Bartlett. I nearly lost it then, but she was in. So it was her podcast, and they did a role swap. Her talking about her benign tumour. So was yours benign, or was it active, or? I know about a lot of cancers, but I don't necessarily know as much about brain tumours.
So mine isn't benign. It's got its jogging trousers on. But it's a lot of the thing with the brain is once you have the tumour is in your head. So mine is a glioma, and I'm very, very fortunate because there are different scales. Sadly, the most common brain tumour, a glioblastoma, it can grow very, very quickly, and the prognosis is very poor. The one that I have responds extremely well to treatment, which I've had, and I think maybe because of I say more my age rather than my health. But
you're not very old, are you? How old are you?
31. I was 20, so I was 29 when it happened. But I managed to tolerate a lot of the treatment very well. And the chemotherapy especially is really tough. Mm. The thing is with the glioma, it's always going to be in your head. There's no way of really getting rid. Like you can't get rid of it. So inevitably, it'll always come back. I don't intervene. So in that case, I don't know what type she had. There are some which they can, I think, totally remove, and you have a very high chance of survival. But I think with the brain, it's very tricky because it's very once something's in your head, it's very hard for it to get out of your head. Mm. And I think that's probably also like. Pancreatic. It's why, pancreatic and brain are very difficult cancers to treat, which is annoying because when I got diagnosed, suddenly thought, well, it's a difficult challenge. It must have had lots of money behind it. And it hasn't. So one of the things I'm very happy to have been involved in is co-founding a campaign, grassroots campaign called Brain Cancer Justice to, hopefully turn terminal into treatable, and that's got a lot of really inspiring people now in it and involved with it. A lot of kind of parliamentarian support. We've got the health department has been engaged with us. I don't think they've met with us yet though, like actually in person, but they do share stuff with us, certainly around like the cancer plan, and yeah, it's good that people like Davina are going on those things and talking about it more because it is an area that needs a lot of help. And sadly, it is a cancer that kills the most, more people die from that cancer under the age of 40 than any other. Jeez. It really impacts children. I remember when we were putting a lot of the website and stuff together for that campaign, and the logo, I don't know who said it to me. It was, sort of said, "Oh, it looks like it's been done by like your mum or dad or something." I was like, "Well, it's probably because it has." Like these are people who have, a lot of people who are campaigning in this area and do tremendous work have lost people, like they've lost their children. Yeah. With this, I've gone through my own journey, and my way of treatment was certainly been kind of working. The newsletter in many ways really did save me, keep me going during some of the tougher parts of treatment. Yeah. But I don't, I find it hard to think of how, like, I can't imagine what it's like for my parents. It must have been, extremely difficult. But a lot of, good has come out of it. I've definitely, since that moment and that diagnosis, I totally changed the way I was thinking. I did think, well, actually, I don't know if I want to work for someone else for the rest of my life, whether it be long or short. And, I probably took more risks, and leaps of faith. Like, I was, one of the great things, I had my friend who is also at the same consultancy as me, Martin Townsend. He was diagnosed with a pancreatic cancer, and he died October last year. But we were talked all the time, and he was proper, friends as we were going through it at the same time. But one of the great things that he did was he brought me to, basically, was the matchmaker for my now partner. So, and I would have never have ever wanted, a relationship or anything. And so there have been positives, and yeah, it's been, in many ways, there are lots of silver lining. I think I'd like to think I'm quite optimistic, and there's
Yeah.
been a lot of silver linings, and because of that campaign as well, and a lot of great other work by some of the charities, it is getting, we're on probably the first or second step. There's a big staircase to go, but progress is happening. The wheel is slowly turning.
That's good for you. And I wanted to bring that out because we talked about it a bit before we started recording, hadn't we? And I just thought, actually, just bringing that story out, to life, it should help people kind of understand, like you say, about taking those risks with those stories, because actually, when you've been near death, because and I can say that I've not talked to you about this, and people who've listened to this podcast for as long as it's been on. I was in a car crash when I was 18, so I was very different to you, but I had very serious injuries. So when you've had those kind of experiences, it does change the way you think about things, doesn't it? So yeah. But I'm so pleased that you're able to talk about it, because it's not always easy, is it, to actually even just discuss things like this.
Yeah, no, it is difficult, and a lot of people find it too much. And I won't lie, like there are times where I find it a lot, and certainly I think my parents and my partner probably find it a lot sometimes. And I tend to joke quite a lot. I have quite dark sense of humour, and I can't make. Sometimes I'll make poor jokes in front of my partner, like, oh, 20, like, oh, it's the mortgage is 25 years. That'll be on you.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, bless you.
But I think you can only, if you just thought about it all the time, you'd never move forward. And actually, you do only, I know people may believe differently, but I tend to think that you're probably only going through this road, once. It's kind of one way, and there's no point kind of, thinking about where you've just driven past. To be honest, you can only really look forward, left and right, maybe. Yeah.
Oh, I'm getting emotional now just listening to you. Bloody hell. No, you're right. You're absolutely right. Because, lots of people live in the past, don't they, and go, what if? But actually, you make life what you can. But we're going to get really deep now, aren't we?
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Motors and
Oh, my goodness. Let's go. Do you know what? I think I want to bring up something that I'm going to change tack here. I want to bring something up that you said before we started recording, because it made me smile, and I think we need this at this point in time. We were talking about why people move to EVs, or why people don't move to EVs. Like you said about when you put it on that kind of the ex Top Gear guys kind of platform, and you get that 50% that say yeah, great idea, and 50% that say crap. But you were saying, you know, that people probably think that if you have to buy an EV, you're going to be living in trees and buying matcha lattes. Well,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, I think people, think that it's almost like it's kind of a cult, and it's, certainly think they're going to
like
have
if
to.
I'm with my bra in my hand, you know, just going, I'm burning it every minute, you know,
Yeah,
or
instantly
not.
think that you can, it starts with paper straws and it ends with an EV, and I think there is that view, and I know there's people talk about fear, is it FUD, like fear, uncertainty, and
Doubt.
doubt
Yeah.
around it, but I think a lot of it actually does come from like big stereotypes. I think in many ways one of the one of the worst things, like branding problems the EV sector has, is that it's been associated with the color green in some ways, I think, because people see that thing and think, oh, it's these people that wear mud and, put together dresses made of feathers and things. Um, and actually, I think now that where the debate is going is a lot better in terms of like
Mm.
thinking of actually the cost savings, the technology, which
Yeah.
is really good, and the just the I say accessibility not in terms of the charges, but in terms of if it does really work for you, clearly there are lots of genuine problems still yet to solve, which is exciting. But for a lot of people, it's a very accessible technology, and I know my parents are very, very, very dubious of electric cars, and but they got a plug-in hybrid just to test it. They have a driveway, they have a garage, and they've just been using the 3-pin plug, and
Mm.
the last time I saw them, they were just getting used to it. They didn't really understand how it worked, and they were like, "Oh, so can I use a public charger on this one? And how big is
Yeah.
it?" So it was things like that. But when I last went up, it didn't come up at all. And actually, I just noticed, occasionally, Dad would go out with the cable and just plug it in. It's like normal. It just becomes. But that's always the case, isn't it? People go on the journey. They're on the change curve.
Exactly. It's funny you should say that. My son, I always talk about my son James on here, but my son James came back from Exeter Uni, so I went down to collect him just over a week ago now. And on the way back, because we get lower range, we've only got a small battery on our car. We've got a lower range, so I charged at there's a Sainsbury's in Exeter. It wasn't the Sainsbury's I intended to go to, but it was still a Sainsbury's anyway. And there was, and it's always, I always have a decent experience at Sainsbury's. And there was a chap there with a plug-in hybrid. I'd already just been talking to another chap who had forgotten that he had 2 charge ports. One was an AC on one side and his DC was on the other.
Mm.
And he'd not had this. This one was electric, the first one. Anyway, so I kind of helped him. He was using contactless on it, and he'd
Yeah.
not used a public charger like that before, so that bit was fine. Then this other chap rocked up, and he had a plug-in hybrid. Now, what I didn't even realise was that plug-in hybrids. I don't know whether it's the same. Somebody's going to be shaking their head, or maybe even you. They only have the AC charger. They can't charge on DC, which I hadn't realised anyway. And I was there was it was a husband and wife. They were probably in their late 60s. She was listening to me, but he was just totally listening to the guy who didn't have a clue either. And I was trying to go, look, if you just download the Electroverse app and you click on
Yeah.
the CCS here, not the double one because that's the DC, which is what you've got here, and finally he got to listen to me, and his wife actually said, "I'm really sorry that he didn't."
Uh,
And I went, "Well, some blokes just think that they know the bloke next to them will know when it's
yeah,
actually a woman who will." And and that made me chuckle. But at least your mum and dad now are more kind of open-minded, and now they understand. And it's that understanding, isn't it, of what have
yeah,
I got, what have I bought. I've not just bought a car, I've bought a car with this thing that I don't understand about, because
yeah.
got petrol and I've driven petrol, but what is this bit and what does that do?
Well, exactly, and in all the advert, like, so the government campaign, I don't know if it's still running, but there was a lot of focus on obviously the cars, the price of the charging, but I couldn't, if memory serves, see any actual just like, you know, op, it like
This
actually
is how it works.
showing, because that's the
Yeah.
bit I think that worries people is
Mm.
this thought that I'm going to be driving and suddenly I'm going to have to stand outside in the pouring English rain, and will it be an app? And I think that is the bit that people get worried about. People know how to use a car. Electric
You
car
can
is,
drive any car, can't
yeah,
you?
exactly. It's just
Any
it's
car
a
you can,
car.
as long as you've passed your test, you can drive any car. But it's just those differences between, right, I've gone from this to this, or I've got my petrol and I've got this
Yeah,
thing. But and that part of that is that education piece from the dealership, and the dealership not just rubbing their hands together going, "Oh, look, another person who's just bought a car." And I'm sorry if you're listening or
yeah.
watching your dealership and you're a good one, but there are some that don't give you that information. They don't give you that understanding or help you to kind of go, right, you've got this plug-in hybrid, this is what it means.
Yeah, exactly. I did. It was probably coming up to a year ago. I went to over 10 car dealerships, just pretending I knew nothing, and I was really shocked by the starting position, pretty much of every dealer when you go, oh, I'm thinking of getting an EV. Um, can you talk to me about it? Their first question is always, what are you driving at the moment? Like in
Mm,
their head, they're kind of calculating what, how am I going to make money out of this potential
mm,
transaction here?
mm.
Like, what am I going to get back from them? And then you know, you're straight off to hearing all the features, but no one's really actually explaining. Well, they're quite similar. No one's asking, well, do you have a driveway, or are
Mm.
you on the street? It took me having to kind of go, well, actually, I live on the street. I don't have any access to a power supply if I'm renting. Um, and then so many people were like, well, there's probably an app or